Wow. I forgot that Bill is doing some amazing indie book recs, and I didn't realize that we get that introduction on the live streams. This is not an indie book rec, but it is talking about them nonetheless. Welcome, everyone. I'm very glad to kick off the holiday season, the December episodes, with a very special guest today. I am not smart, actually, and realized back when he was releasing arcs for book 2, I signed up for one, I got it, and I read probably the first 80 pages before going, I am lost. And then I looked at the cover and I was like, oh, book 2. So ever since then, I have made an effort to go back and read book 1 and then book 2, the way that publication is intended. And I'm glad I did so because both of them were great. There is another short novella that is coming out very shortly. So as soon as I heard that, I reached out, and I was very glad that he was receptive and is joining me here today to kick off the December shows. So I'm bringing him to the stage. Please welcome Mr. Andrew Watson.
Hello, thank you. That was a great introduction. I forgot about that with book 2. That's really funny.
Yeah, dude. I signed up for it, and you very graciously sent me one, and I started reading it, and I was like, he's really throwing me right into the deep end on this one. And then I think
just a wee bit more exposition needed, maybe.
Yeah, I was like, I feel like I'm missing maybe 450 pages or something. If there was really a way to tie this all in together, that would have been great. And then I went back and looked on the Kindle, and I was like, oh, okay. But I am definitely grateful that you joined me here today, especially in the evening over by you.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do this the proper way, and I'm gonna start with book 1. Which I finished maybe about 2 weeks or so ago. Yeah. Harbinger of Justice, which just to start off real quick, stunning cover, amazing cover.
Yeah. Nah, Felix nailed it. You always trust Felix. I just know it's going to be a good cover when I work with Felix. I'm just like, Felix, do a thing that's really cool. He's like, okay, and then he always does something that's really cool.
Yeah, and it always comes out very. Did he do the cover for book 2 as well, and all of them since then?
He has done. He's doing all like the main books. So he did Harbinger of Justice, The Black Mantle, and he's already done book 3 as well. But I've not unveiled that yet. But I am working with a guy called Chris Illustration on the Novellas. He did the Silence is Silver and the new one, Tomb of Tomes, is coming out in January. He also killed it with both those covers. And I don't think I ever had the conversation with Chris, but he's really blended in like the styles really well. Like they look good as like the 5 together. So I assume he's looked into the covers and he was trying to make it stylistically work together. But because Chris is great as well. So it's always great. I love working with artists. It's definitely a highlight of the process. So yeah.
It's very cool to see what you create as the author and write everything down, and that conversation between you and the artist to bring it to life. Because you could almost, when you're reading, especially book 1, which is what we're talking about right now, this is a scene that you could picture while you're reading it. I feel like one of the biggest positives of your writing specifically is the descriptive nature of it. This felt like I was transported to, I butcher every pronunciation, but it's Yantar, correct?
Perfect.
Okay, so it felt like you were there in the sands with all the characters just wandering through the streets, especially towards the beginning where you're first getting that foothold. And the 2 characters have completely different backgrounds, the 2 POVs that I'm talking about at least. But how did you go about creating both of them and their backgrounds and making it so unique to this story?
Oh, that's a good question. I think mainly for me, I had Rye first. The first time I wrote Harbinger of Justice, the main focus was Rye. I had a wee bit more of kind of what ended up in book 2 in book 1 originally, or at least in the outline before I started properly drafting book 1. In the outline stage, I had a more Rye focused story. And then I was writing book 1 and I kind of write the start, and I was listening to a lot of writing podcasts and interviews and reading books. I can't remember which one it was. but I think it was it might have been Save the Cat writes a novel or something like that, and it said, oh, your main character should be the one that goes through the most. And I looked at my outline and went, I think Naya goes through more in book one than Rai does, because he's kind of more of a mysterious character that you learn more of, especially in book two. And it's kind of just narratively, Naya gets put through the ringer in book one. So I was thinking, okay, it makes sense to make her kind of the main character. So I shifted my focus onto her as like the main through line for book one. And then book two is kind of Rai's book. So they are both the main characters, but they kind of have like a book each where we really focus in on one. But yeah, I think from a narrative standpoint, it's quite nice because they are so different. You get to see the world very differently, and they go through some similar experiences. I don't know how much I want to touch on it being spoiler free, but seeing it from both their perspectives is really interesting, and like how one then plays into the other, I thought was a really fun thing to play with as from a writing standpoint. So having things set up in one, and then you start to realize the mysterious things that are happening in the other point of view are actually connected, and having that knowledge because you've seen the world through another character's eyes, I think is really something that's quite fun to play with.
Yeah, and it really came across done very well, especially where, you know, you're kind of talking about how almost each of them has their own book, because they're both heavily present in each of them. But from the moment you kind of see Naya running around with the sand rats, it jumped off, and I was like, that was the hook for me. Because I came in, like I mentioned, having read 100 pages of book two to not knowing where book one was going to go. And just the way that I could tell that her story was going to go from almost kind of like Aladdin, where it's like you're a gutter rat, you know, the street rat, that type of thing. It really transported me to her story and her jump off point. What went into the background of the world that we're living in here? Because, you know, so often in fantasy, you see the medieval stuff. I've read a couple Japanese inspired books this year, but this was way more Middle Eastern, Egyptian. Is that kind of what you wanted to do with it when you first set out to write?
Yeah. That was kind of probably the first ever thought for this series, or for the Shadowbinders trilogy, was ancient Egyptian but fantasy. And I've had it for so long, since like I was a kid. I remember back in primary school, I was always fascinated by ancient Egypt. That was like the real version of fantasy, because there was so much like unknown and really cool mythology and mystery around it. And then I read the Kane Chronicles by Rick Riordan, same guy who did Percy Jackson. I think I'm pronouncing his last name wrong actually, but him. And it was awesome, and I loved like the ancient Egyptian mythology stuff, and I was like, how cool would this be in like epic fantasy? So since then I was like, if I'm going to write an epic fantasy, I really wanted to have sort of that aesthetic, but also pull bits from the mythology as well. So it is kind of cherry pick things out of the the mythology. It's not really ancient Egyptian mythology built into the world, but I do kind of take elements from it, especially with the justice elements. There's a ancient Egyptian myth where when you die, they have your heart on a scale with the feather of truth, and if your heart's too heavy, then you get thrown into their version of hell. Or if you're lighthearted, or I think if they equally, I think if they're equal, then you get to go to like their version of this like glorious afterlife, that exactly how they want it. So that was one of the elements I took out of that, but I kind of made it a wee bit different and kind of a wee bit more sinister, I guess, and pushing towards the later parts of the book. So I think elements like that, it's just nice to kind of take from, but not necessarily, I didn't want to make it just ancient Egyptian in epic fantasy. I wanted to make it my own. A bit like I did talk to John Gwynn about this in Brighton a couple months ago, because he did something similar with Norse mythology with the Bloodsworn, where he took like a lot of elements from it, and you can kind of see, if you're into Norse mythology, you can see the sort of mirroring and stuff like that, but he's very much his own world and own characters and mythology, and that's just something I thought was really, really cool, and I wanted to kind of do something similar with ancient Egypt and epic fantasy.
Oh, that's very cool. It's very funny you mentioned John Gwynn too, because when I was on the Goodreads page, a lot of comparisons inversely to Naya's mother and and Orca on there. I've got to say, I know that Naya's mom had some issues going on. I'm trying to prevent spoilers as well, but
Yeah.
wow, despicable character.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
really kind of horrendous to deal with.
Yeah.
And I feel like also one of the uh, most well done parts of the book was kind of the emotional turmoil that the characters are going through. Especially Naya, like you said, she really gets put through the ringer in this one. Um,
Yeah.
but was when you set out to write just her arc specifically, was that something you had planned where it was you're going to get beaten down, knocked around, and it was a very kind of good way to get across her, because halfway through the book and towards the end it's almost like, stop making bad decisions, stop doing this, like please
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
but it kind
Yeah.
of went with her character because she is a young girl who was in a street gang at the beginning. She's taking care of other people to take care of her mother essentially. But when you set out to write that, did you know that it was going to go from her having to take care of these people to someone having to take care of her?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. What I really liked about like kind of setting up her arc as a character is that even throughout like most of the book, she's a pretty good person, and I think she really, really tries to be a good person, despite the fact that the world keeps beating down on her. And I really liked that she stuck to that for so long. And then when she does kind of have a wee bit of a wobble at some points, you can kind of understand, but it's kind of sad to see that she's kind of moving away from these really nice values.
Mhm.
So I did want to create this character who is very just positive and um, gets put through the ringer, but still manages to pull herself back up and really knock her down over and over again until she was really struggling to get back up. And I think that's just a really interesting character to kind of see how much she can face and how much she can really stick to her convictions when things get really, really hard.
Mhm.
And kind of what that can do to a person, and even long term with her future arc and future books, and kind of how that affects people even after the fact, and how you can kind of become a bit cynical to some elements of the world as well. Yeah, I really like doing that, and I liked one of the things I've kind of played with that part of her character is with the sand fox Dust. I mean, Dust is at her side for most of the book, but when she has her wobble, Dust can kind of sense that it's off, and she kind of moves off to the side with other characters. She kind of forgets that this isn't the Naya that she should be,
Mhm.
which was just kind of another nice kind of visual element to kind of show some of that arc.
Yeah, it definitely was, especially because Dust, first off, Dust unanimously praised. I was going through, it was the way I would die for Dust. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, like this is going to be the fan club moment
Yeah.
starting right here.
I've
But
had
yeah,
so many threats about Dust's fate. She's like, "Don't you hurt Dust?" I'm like, "Okay, that's fine for now."
I'm sure Dust wasn't going to get hurt, but was there? Now that's actually a funny question. Was there any feedback from based on book one that influenced the way things went in book two and beyond so far?
Oh, I think I'm trying to remember if there's anything in specifically. I don't think so necessarily on reviews. I try and avoid reading reviews unless I'm tagged in them. So I get more with like kind of beta reader feedback. I did have one beta reader feedback that was able to pick out some world building details that I should have picked up on in book two that weren't quite working. And I was just so impressed that people were able to see that. And I was like, how did I miss that? It was something so small, but managed to chip away. So I wouldn't say from reviews. I try and kind of avoid reviews. I usually read the reviews before release for like the ARC copies, but then when book's out, I'm just like,
There
don't
it
want to
is.
get involved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's interesting. It's always very cool to hear, especially from indie authors, because I've only kind of been around this scene for like a year and a half or 2 years. And I remember going to message you and going on like the Instagram, and I was like, this dude's got that many followers? Like, holy shit. And I
Yeah.
just thought, I don't realize or make the connection to it, but in the indie scene, I like asking this question because a lot of people sometimes are kind of, I got into this to write. Like I am a writer and this is what I like to do. And some things don't come naturally. whether it's the social media, the marketing, thing, and creating the reels, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Was that something that you had to kind of go, this is like the cross to bear if I'm an indie author, I got to get the hang of it? Or
Yeah.
was that more of something, I'm going to jump into this and enjoy it? And because yours are great. So was that
Well,
something
thank you.
that kind of came second naturally to you, or was that a little bit of a challenge that you didn't expect to have to do?
There's kind of multiple things to this. I would say, first of all, I kind of had like the technical side down, because I have a degree in digital media. So like the filming aspects and the editing and stuff like that, I kind of had all that sorted pretty much before I even started Instagram or YouTube or anything like that. But the thing that was kind of harder for me, especially early on, is the shift to becoming in front of the camera. Definitely more of an introvert. So kind of talking to the camera or even doing live streams, going to events and stuff. That was harder for me to learn rather than the actual technical side. It took a little bit of time because talking to a camera is really weird. It's not like talking to someone, or even like a live is completely different because I feel like we're having a conversation. But filming like a video or a reel, it's really weird. But I did actually make my channels. I made my Instagram page before I started writing Harbinger, I think. And kind of my thought process early on was to just make a profile so I can interact with more readers. A lot of my friends and stuff don't read the same books as I do. A lot of them don't read at all. I've only got one really that lives near me that reads similar types of books. So I kind of just wanted to, I started following people on my personal account, and I was like, why don't I just make a book account and I can just talk about books? It makes more sense rather than just filling my feed full with like normal friend stuff or whatever, and also books. So that was kind of why I made the accounts. And then, yeah, it just kind of grew into a community, and then it just continued to do well. And I really like making videos and stuff now. So it's just something that I didn't realize that I would like so much. But I've always kind of been into making videos, but I didn't realize that this type of community building thing would become such a big element of this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's I just had to do the same thing like a couple months ago where you have to split that personal and the, but I'm putting professional in quotes. You're a legitimate professional. I just got a microphone like a week and a half ago, so baby steps. But yeah, it's always funny to see that because that the whole indie scene and everything a lot more marketing goes into it than you would expect. Whether it's not even just that, hey, buy my book, or hey, this is free today, or hey, that type of thing. But it's like getting your face out there so that people will connect with you. I feel like you do a very good job of that. Where when we talked even before this, it was, I know this dude already. Like this is becoming like second nature. So I feel like that is something that is very underrated, but you managed to do well. So kudos to that.
Yeah, I do think some, especially newbie authors, make accounts just to promote their books. But I think you just start posting into a void if all you do is post about your book. And I might have swayed too much the wrong way because I don't talk about my books as much as I probably should. But I do think there's like a middle ground where you can kind of post about what you're doing, but also just interact, comment with people. I mean, I've met so many awesome people through doing this. I mean, I've run into them in events in real life as well. I mean, there's Lauren in the chat and stuff. It's cool to see so many familiar faces and actually have conversations with them about books and about writing, but also about what we're reading. And I think if you think about it more as a way to interact with people and just post more about what you're reading and writing, I think you just go a lot further than just posting about your book, because then it just comes across as artificial and you're just promoting a product rather than interacting with anyone.
I definitely agree. It's always funny every once in a while, and I am not calling anyone out because I don't have the time in my life to argue online anymore. But it's very funny when you see like 5 underrated books that you should read, and like the last 2 are the person posting it, and you're okay, like got it. Luckily, though, I haven't seen that a lot, but it's like you say, it's very just like, just say 3 then. Like
yeah.
There's another comment in here which I wanted to bring up. I mentioned it before we even got started, repping the bass players back there. can you give some background, I guess, not just on the bass playing, but just other hobbies you have? What led into, you developing into the person that you are today? I feel like a little bit of background is always good to have.
Yeah, for sure. So in primary school, books and writing was like my big thing. And then when I got into high school, I kind of started to move away from all of that. I don't know if it's just, I think a lot of people go through something similar. The amount of people I've had this conversation with, they go, yeah, same. Where in high school, kind of reading just becomes this thing that you do for school and not for fun anymore. So I kind of moved away from reading in high school and I was looking for other creative outlets. And that started with music. So music was a massive thing for me in high school. Thought I was going to be a rock star or something. Failed at that. So I played a lot of guitar through high school and got into like filmmaking and stuff like that in high school. And I do think there's a lot of like translation to this, to writing. There's like storytelling elements in music and also in filmmaking, obviously, and kind of how you shoot things and things like that is really important. And it is a different medium, but there's a lot of skills and ideas and concepts that kind of carry across into writing. So when I did eventually circle back, which was pretty much 2020, I was finishing up my dissertation. It was the longest document I'd ever written. I can't remember how long it was, but it was not book length. And I thought, what's a really good idea while I'm in the middle of finishing this dissertation? I should start writing. So I started writing a sci-fi book actually in 2020. It was terrible and no one's going to get to see it. So that's kind of where it started. And then after that, I kind of scrapped that and went, right, okay, I've done it. I wrote a book. I did edit it and did finish it, but it just wasn't working. To get it to work, it would be major revisions. So then I kind of just went back and thought, right, starting from scratch. Fantasy. I don't know why I picked sci-fi because I read way more fantasy, but this time I was like, fantasy, that makes more sense being a fantasy reader, Andrew. And then Harbinger of Justice was started like 2022, and then released it kind of mid 2023, so like a year and a half. It had been in my head for years and years before that, but yeah.
It's very cool to see how long it kind of percolates in there before really getting written out and everything. And something I never realized was how long that process takes, where even on the fast end of things, if you wrote it in like 8-9 months, then there's the editing, the cover design, all these things that go into it was something that I was so unfamiliar with a couple years ago to it. I don't know what I thought happened. Like, you just wrote a book and all of a sudden it was like, here's your cover, and then it's out there. And I was like, it's just very funny to hear the people's point of views on the writing process and all of these things that go into it that someone may not know until really learning about it.
Or a map. I didn't realize how big maps were. I wasn't really a big map fan when I was starting to read, but then I got into the community and realized how important maps were. I was like, I'm going to need a map. So I went to this cartographer who's amazing, Joshua Hoskins, Noctua Cartography. Fantastic guy. He's really, really good. But at that point, it was quite early on in his career, or at least before he made the jump to all digital. So he hand drew this map for me. And at the time, I didn't actually realize it was hand drawn. I thought it was digital, and I should have looked closer at the fine print. I'm an idiot. And he sent the map to me, and it got stuck in customs. And I'm looking at this release date, and I'm looking at this map in customs going, I need this map now, because I was formatting the book. And I was like, this is going to be so tight. So it arrived. Luckily, it was really late because of customs. I ran down, got it scanned, and then got it into the just in time to get the print editions out. I was panicking.
Last minute stress you totally need on your debut book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's wild how long everything takes. It's just insane. Even like the processing times. If you publish with Ingram Spark, again, I love Ingram Spark. They're really good. The final quality of the book's fantastic, but they have this processing time that I do not understand. When you upload a book, it takes, I'm currently on day 3 or 4 for Tomb of Tomes, waiting for the digital proof to come through, not physical, the digital proof, which is just a PDF of what I already uploaded. Yeah. And then I have to take that off before I can order a physical copy to make sure they're fine. So I'm like, why am I waiting 3-5 days for the same thing back? I don't understand. Maybe there is some technical reason that's gone over my head, but yeah, publishing, there's so much that takes so much time. I think people especially debut authors in the indie space that have to do kind of all these different elements. Don't realize how long everything takes on, because I certainly didn't. And I've had a lot of conversations with others that thought the same. It's it's wild.
It is. It's very cool that that map, especially from book one, is hand drawn. Even going digital. I found
cool.
What was that? Sorry.
No, not just saying, it is cool having it hand drawn as well. I do quite like that.
Yeah,
cool.
it's awesome. It's not easier to do a digital or anything. Like, I went to a digital site and was just tinkering with the map, and it made me realize how obnoxiously uncreative I am. And it was like, I took like the cursor and was like, and over here islands, and like I looked at it after, I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you're clicking and dragging like a mountain range through the whole thing, and it was just like, it just, I guess I didn't realize how immersive every different aspect of creating a book is. You know, it's like you said, like the map, everything, even the formatting of the book, the way that like the chapter headers are, the interior art, like all these things that go along with it. It's just like, I just thought that was there. So it's just interesting that that's how it happens.
Again, I've talked to so many authors about that exact thing. Is the fact that there's so much to it that you don't think about until you kind of stumble across it. And especially even like on a logistical standpoint, dealing with rights and like where you're going to put your ebook. Are you going to go wide? Are you going to do just Amazon? Because there's a lot of benefits to both. Physical copies, how are you going to deal with it? It can be a nightmare. There's so much to kind of judge and juggle. It's a lot easier the second time around just because you kind of have that overview, but there's not really a good overview that anyone's done. I've thought about making a video of kind of the overview of everything, but it's overwhelming. I've been putting it off. I'd love to do it, but there's a lot to it.
It's a lot. Going back to what's on the wall. Going back to what's on the wall behind you, when you were trying to be your rock star, in your rock star era, I suppose is what kids are calling it these days. I'm like the oldest 36-year-old of all time. But what type of music were you into? I'm a big music guy as well, so I'm curious about that.
A lot of rock and metal, especially in high school. So like I think my favorite band, especially then, was Iron Maiden. I did get to see Iron Maiden live, which was awesome. So kind of like older 80s, 90s metal was kind of like my big thing at that point in life. I listen to like so many random genres now, but back then especially, it was mainly old sort of classic rock and metal.
It's very... What about you? Very interesting. I was also in high school. I was a big metal guy, but I'm also a very big jam band fan. Grateful Dead, cool. That type of stuff. But it's... Whenever I talk to people, it almost is those two genres exclusively, which is very funny. And I feel like the correlation between both of them, where there's such a big indie metal scene and such a big, like, the jam band stuff is a lot of fans, selling stuff on the side of the road to get to the next show, the sense of community in metal shows. And everything as well. It almost transcends those genres of music and makes it easier to jump into this indie scene of writing. I feel like the community is very supportive of one another. It's a lot of networking and a lot of, have you heard of this? Like, if you like Iron Maiden, you should check out these underground guys, and, suggestions from there. It's just very funny that the more I talk to people, the more, especially metal, is a big genre.
The same people.
It's very funny. But pivoting back to Harbinger, because this was one of my favorite aspects of the book, the shadow magic that kind of goes into it, without spoiling anything, how Fax shows up, all of these things, because this is kind of a big topic that Rai is looking for throughout the book. What made you want to kind of delve into having those animal companions, the ability for shade to play such a huge role in it, especially in like a desert environment?
So the magic kind of came around the same time as like the setting. I was thinking about deserts, and I just kind of had deserts in my head, and I was thinking bright suns, lots of dark shadows, very like high contrast, and that was kind of that was pretty much it. I had this idea, it's like magic, shadow magic would be really cool, and there's actually multiple magic systems in the world that kind of aren't touched on in this trilogy, and kind of basing it one of them off this sort of shadow element was something I really wanted to explore, especially in this setting, and it kind of just expanded from there. I accidentally kind of wrote it, not accidentally, but it was kind of on purpose. I did kind of want to hint at some of the themes and stuff there, with kind of like the mental health struggles and kind of having this voice in your head, this animal companion, and kind of having more so with another one that you get later on in the book than Fax, because Fax is, well, I guess Fax could be, you know, a chirpy wee voice in the back of your head. So that was something I kind of wanted to play as. I love animal companions, so if I was doing a magic system, I was like, yeah, it'd be really cool if I could tie the animal companions to that too. It's just something I love to read, and yeah, that was kind of the rough idea of how it all came out.
It's very interesting because I read a couple other books with similar types of magic to it, and this felt so unique and fully fleshed out to it. I agree with Nat, who was in the chat saying everything's better with an animal companion.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
I 100% agree. And I thought their relationship, where it's almost like, you know, the shades, you can tell, very insidious, as opposed to a lot of other animal companions. There's no like good boy. Yeah. Not so much with these characters, which really added that.
Rye's not a fan of Fax for most of the book.
No,
but I liked that sort of grumpy sunshine trope setup. I loved that, and that was something I wanted to lean into with those two.
I thought that was one of the best parts, especially as you're getting your footing reading the story, and it's just like, oh, okay, so Fax is helping him, but it's not the kind of help that Rye wants, and it's almost never asked for. He spends more of the book going, no, like, ease back, don't do that. And it's like, let me kill them. And he's like, It's very funny, their dynamic, which I definitely appreciate. It's dark humor, and I don't think do you consider this to be dark fantasy if you have to classify it?
Yeah,
I would think so.
Dark fantasies, dark epic fantasies, usually the term I use for it. Yeah. It's one of those words that's really hard to use, because what's dark for someone isn't dark for everybody. And also, I do find that some people think dark is only going to be like the darker, like the entire book has to be dark. But because it has those kind of funny elements, you're like, yeah, it has some really messed up dark scenes, but also has some funny scenes as well. And it's like, I usually say dark epic fantasy, but yeah, I can see how some people might go in expecting it to be darker, and otherwise I can see people going in and starting it and then thinking it's going to be not as dark, and then they get to the darker scenes and go, oh, this is quite dark actually. So it's harder. It's hard to kind of come up with a terminology for it, but I do think, especially when you move on to book 2, it's a lot darker, so it makes sense to kind of set that idea up early. So I'm not too surprised.
It's definitely dark, and it's like almost the appropriate levels of it. Like when I was reading this wasn't anything where it jumped off the page where it was like gratuitous and not making sense why it would be so horrendous what is happening. It flowed very well with the story and really made sense with everything. And I feel like those parts where it jumped off the page of brutality, it was necessary and really like hammered it home much more than if you kind of ease back on it to not be that brutal, where you're like, oh, okay, like that could have gone wrong, as opposed to, oh, they're in deep shit. Like,
yeah.
It was very cool. And pivoting into book 2, like you said, where this really took up the notches of darkness a little bit.
Yeah.
What made you want to, first off, again, another Felix cover. This is, you know, just to give more credit to you and him and your collaboration, this cover was initially what drew me to requesting the arc for the series, and what drew me into it. Because look at that. Like, how do you not want to read that?
I know. And the funny thing is, with book one, we kind of had a back and forth to kind of get that like final result. With this one, I kid you not, I could send you the first draft he emailed me. It's so close to the final product. I was like, yes. He was like, any notes? I'm like, no. Keep going.
Print it.
It looks amazing. It was so easy to work with him for, especially the Black Mantle, just because it was so, he just seemed to click with it really quickly. I did have a brief and everything sent over, so you knew all the details, but even still, he nailed it. He really did a fantastic job of visualizing the landscape and the scene and Rye and everything else. So yeah, he did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it actually kind of goes very well with what you're saying earlier, where book one is a little more Naya focused. Book two, much more focused on Rye. So him on the cover just like that is really kind of perfect and very foreboding to what comes in the story. I think the biggest aspect of book two that made it so much fun, especially as I was reading it, was the incorporation of the flashbacks. I thought it's very easy for a flashback to, or especially multiple flashbacks, to get out of hand. And you're just like, you know, you see it every once in a while where something pops on the page and you're just like, okay, like we're back in time and it's not going to be as interesting as what I'm currently going through. But yours were. What went into making those flashbacks such a important part of the story as what's going on present day? It felt like you couldn't gloss over anything.
Yeah, this was something that I was a wee bit concerned about, because I thought there is so many books that kind of have flashbacks and it does kind of pull readers out of the moment. And like, if something I was really trying hard to avoid. And one of the things I did to kind of avoid that was when I was outlining, I outlined the present day and the flashbacks at the same time. And I outlined it so you learned something here and it told you something about here, and like it had this back and forth. And I was like, if you're getting pinged back and forth, it feels like you're kind of going through the narrative, because you're going back in time and then up, but it still feels like a straight path. It doesn't feel like you're bouncing between two point of view characters. They are intrinsically tied and they are feeding into each other at the same time. And the other thing is the order of like the chapters and stuff. If something's really high octane action, lots of important stuff going on, there's a section towards the end of part one or part two in Black Mantle where I have like 3 or 4 ride chapters, maybe 3 ride chapters back to back, because I was like, it needs to roll like that. If I had like it would pull someone out of the action. So I just needed that like lead up to that climax of that section. So I think a lot of it's to do with the structure, and also when you're putting your flashbacks in and making sure they are vital to the story, and just making sure that it isn't just world building details or character building. I was trying to make everything very purposeful. If we are back in Rise Past and we're getting fed details about things that happened, it needs to be important to what's happening now as well.
And it's very easy to see that. It kind of goes back to, I feel, not that I appreciate things more than other readers, because I don't. Everyone has their own perspective on it. But like I said, I was a big jam band guy, and a lot of the times the way that those artists construct the set lists, very peaks and flows. Like you can't have just hardcore shredding on the guitar. You're not going to listen to Creeping Death for 2.5 hours at a concert. At some point you're just like, chill. Like you need something in there where it's a valley to bring it back down. You release the tension and then, start building it back up again like a roller coaster. And that came across so perfectly in book 2, and it's like the way you just mentioned it, kind of the structure of the way that the chapters go, where for the most part it's a back and forth between the 2 POVs, but if you need 3 of them in a row to really drive home that point and hammer that, it's what gets done, and it flowed so well throughout the entire story that it felt like you're on a roller coaster, and it let you breathe. And I feel like that's also sometimes a very underrated aspect of someone's talent, where it doesn't have to be pedal to the metal the entire time, because the stakes staying that high, it's just like, I don't care anymore. Like I know what's happening, and nothing is going to change as the story happens. They're always going to be in danger. They're always going to get out of it. There's never a time to ease back and reflect and kind of plan ahead for what's going on. So I thought you did an incredible job of that, especially, you know, in book 2.
No, thank you. Thanks.
It was very well done. It's it almost led into what I was going to ask next, more about the writing process. But you mentioned that you're an outliner, not a seat of the pants guy.
Kind of, yeah. It's definitely more of a spectrum, and I'm definitely probably leaning more towards outliner. I have like the main plot points planned out, but for the most part, I kind of write between them. So things do change, and quite often, my first draft, if I get to a certain point and something else works better, or there's just an element that isn't working, I go back to the outline and I can re-outline during the process. So like my first draft can be a bit messy. It can just kind of throwing the story down and making sure everything's there, and it can be a bit weird. And then after that, I'm refining it to making sure it all works together. But yeah, I would say probably more of an outliner, but still leaving space to kind of have fun and write things in. There's also things that kind of come up that wasn't originally planned. Even in this third book that I'm writing right now, there was a kind of minor part to the story that is becoming more and more substantial, and I'm looking at my outline going, I need to re-outline this to make it more substantial and make it work, because it's just something that just makes sense in the narrative. And I think sometimes you can, when I'm outlining, I find it really hard to get into the story, but when I'm drafting, you're in the world. You're in the world, you're seeing through the character's eyes, you're doing X, Y, and Z, and that's really fun. So you definitely see more when you're drafting, but I still need that sort of track that I'm moving towards this point, and then after that, the next point, and then the next point, to get into the story and kind of have this visualization early on to get drafting. But then after that, I can kind of veer it slightly, and usually we end up roughly around the same place. But yeah, I think I like having both.
It's interesting because I see this a lot, messy first drafts, and I feel like that is almost a rite of passage as you guys are writing stuff. I've heard a lot of the time where it doesn't matter how it flows at first, as long as you're getting the words out there. You can always go back in. That's what second, third drafts are for, a good editor, those types of things, which again is something that I never even really considered. And when you talk to more and more people, especially over the summer, my first like mega giant guest was Anthony Ryan over the summer, and I asked him about this because Bloodsong is, in my opinion, one of the best debut self-published books ever, because it's insane. I can't gush about it enough, but when I talked to him about it, the differences between the indie and the trad world, his big advice was get a good editor. And it's like, it's crazy, like things like that. Is that something that you know, like you mentioned your background in the digital media, and when you first started writing, you know, your ideas are fantastic, the end result are great books, but is that something that you didn't realize how valuable would be along the way, that extra set of eyes helping put all of this together?
Yeah, I would say I definitely wanted someone who I knew had a better eye for this, especially early on, because I knew, especially with like the first book, I would be learning a lot of things. So especially the first draft. So for the first draft, I just throw down everything. And you're talking about like the flow and stuff like that. You can't really judge that when you're writing a first draft. It is something that you have to do afterwards. It's like, okay, this passage is taking too long. Okay, I've skimmed over this far too quickly. Oh, this kind of needs to be restructured slightly. And that's impossible to tell when you're drafting. So I think first draft is just a situation where you need to get the story down. And even if it's terrible, or if sections of it are terrible, and you just slowly chip away at it draft after draft and fix certain parts of it. And I think flow, story continuity is not flow, flow's maybe one of the later ones, but continuity and story and character arc is some of the first things you kind of deal with. And I edited Harbinger several times, but I knew I wanted to get someone who was like a professional to look over it. So even while I was doing the first draft, I knew in my head I wanted Felix Ortiz to do the cover, and I wanted to work with Sarah Chorn as an editor because she's fantastic, and I knew several books that she worked on and read them, and they were great, and she had a really good name in the indie space, but also she does a lot of trad stuff as well now. And I'd seen some interviews with her, and just how she talked about editing, I was like, I like that as like a way to do it. it just clicked with how she thought about editing. So I was like, okay, I knew I had to work with her. So yeah, working with her was invaluable. There was so much I learned, especially with the first book, and just from her notes. I remember there was one element where I had to add in a chapter or two after her notes, and I sent her the new chapters back, and she's like, "These are so much cleaner." And I was like, "Yeah, just because I've learned so much from going through your notes." I really did learn a lot from working with her, especially right at the start when you do learn so much so quickly. You kind of get that, and learning kind of all the different writing quirks of what works, what doesn't, and it's the things that you don't see, and that's kind of the most important thing, because there's lots of things you can kind of learn and fix if you do some research and read books, but there's things in your writing that you cannot see, and having those other bits of eyes is some of the best things that you can do to get that final product as best as it can be.
It's interesting. I've heard her name a lot as well, and it always comes up when people talk great editors. So special shout out to her. I see her. It's funny the things you pick up at this point where you open a book. It's almost like as a digital guy, where you watch a movie at the end and people just fast forward through the credits or shut it off. And now I'm opening books and I look and I'm like, cover jacket designed by, edited by. And like it's funny the things you start to pick up on, but she does great work. I didn't know she edited your books as well, so special shout out to her.
No, she's great.
And digging into book 2 a little bit further, like we said, kind of the main focus on the book changed, and with the flashbacks, everything like that. How do you go about, especially as kind of the story goes even deeper and we get more background knowledge onto the shades and how they come about, how do you kind of go into balancing the world building as it gets more complex and the character development to still make us feel so invested in their journey along the way?
Yeah, so I think with world building for me, I have pretty much everything up front. So especially with the first draft, when I have the first draft down, a lot of the stuff gets solidified in my head. So I did have notes and pretty big picture world building ideas before in the outlining stage. But I think after the first draft, you really get like a lot of it nailed into your head with how it's going to work. And I had all that, but I didn't want to. I was always afraid of over, info dumping and exposition stuff that I just wasn't required. So I'm really quite careful where I'm putting my world building. And if it's not relevant, then I'm not going to mention it, which is one of the reasons why I like doing like the novellas, because there's side stuff that I'm like, this is really fun, but I can't put it in the main book because it just would be tacked on. So it's fun to kind of explore those elements in different venues, but especially with the world building that needs to come across for the plot going forward, you need to have specific scenes and reveals that make sense for the world building information to come across. And it's just finding a way to fit that into your plot. And I think even characterization is the same. It's kind of like the synergy between the three. And if you can tie one moment to several things together, then it just becomes a really satisfying scene in the book. It's something that Sanderson does really, really well. I think it's why so many people really, really like his book and why he's so widely popular, is because he has these big moments where everything kind of comes together. Like you have Kaladin, and he comes to some grand realization that changes his character, but also at the same time there's a jump in the magic system where you learn this new thing, and there's this sudden burst of power, and then it is just this really cool climactic moment that kind of pulls everything together. So creating as many of those as you can throughout the story, even on smaller scale. So if you're revealing something with the world building, say, okay, but why are they there? Why are they doing that? How did they see it? That was another thing that I think is really important, because it depends on whose character's head you're in, if they're going to even notice it. It's one of the reasons why I liked having the scholar in book 2, Yeru, who kind of turned up, and she was always going to be there because she does some stuff between book 1 and 2, and that's what the new novella Tomb of Tomes is about. But having her just as like a way to show some of the things that wouldn't naturally come up with like Rai, because Rai's, he thinks, but sometimes he doesn't think. So having those moments from a scholar's perspective can be quite nice, or just having her there that she can see things that he can't. I think is really important. So I think perspective, synergy with the moments, that sort of stuff really helps with making it feel more cohesive and come together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. It's very interesting, especially to see from book 1 to book 2. It's almost like leaving a trail of breadcrumbs along the way, especially with Rye's character. How, again, no spoilers or anything, but with one of the, especially in book 1, one of the, I guess, villains towards the middle of the book and leading into the end, you start to see their relationship and go into flashbacks. Like you're kind of leading it with a couple of quick scenes, not nearly as many in book 1, but when those first started happening, it was, like it really is kind of building the whole world in, the reader's head, where you start to see why he connects so closely with Naya in the book, and with what goes into making those decisions, where if that didn't happen and you didn't have the world building to go along with it, it wouldn't have the emotional impact of the things that he's doing along the way. It would almost just be like, this is a bad guy, kill him. Like, that's all I need to know. And you start to really kind of peel back those layers along the way. And it's like, now you see why this is such a tough decision for him and for all the other characters having to go through what they do. It's very, very cool and a very unique way of storytelling in these books. I really appreciated it a lot. It was very cool.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, another thing is you need to trust the reader. I think it's way more satisfying when you as a reader make the connection and you don't need to be spoon-fed. You're like, oh, that's because, oh, of course. And it's just a lot more entertaining from a reading standpoint. So having kind of this early breadcrumbs and hinting, foreshadowing stuff, I find really entertaining, the stuff I read. So it's definitely something I wanted to include as much as possible in my stuff. And even like again, tying it into the world building, one of the things that I really liked with book 1 is that Rye's kind of this beat up mercenary. You don't really know much about his past, but you do find out that in the flashbacks, he has a lot longer a name, which raises some questions like, okay, so clearly he rose to this point of importance and fell off at some point for some reason. And you kind of start to build this idea in your head of what his past kind of looks like, but you might not know why that is the case. And it's kind of just setting up earlier on, so later on it makes more sense in book 2 when you get the flashbacks, and then you can see his entire arc. It's just kind of hinting at it early on, which I thought was quite fun. And again, that's in the world building rather than spoken out loud by a character or something like that.
Yeah, and I actually, it's very funny to see. I'm going to ask this question next, but on the Kindle especially, it's really cool because you get to see what other people highlight, and you don't know what's important when you're first reading it. But one of the first things I highlighted was that the longer a person's name, the more important they are in power and everything like that. Where'd that idea come from? Because that was so unique to me that when I saw it, I think you mention it for the first time, or it gets mentioned. You don't tell. It's, like you just described, but maybe like 4 pages in, that idea or concept is mentioned. And I knew right away, I was like, highlight. Where'd that come from?
So I was looking at fancy names, and there is a thing about fancy names being really, really long. It's a lot of joke, especially from like other genres, like, oh yeah, your character's blah, 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 is his name. And I was kind of looking at doing something. I always thought that was very amusing. So when I was coming up with character names, a lot of them were quite short, because I like the short kind of catchy names kind of stick in your head. And I was thinking, why are they all going to be short? Why does that make sense kind of like from a narrative standpoint? And I kind of just came up with the idea from that, and kind of built off that idea, and then just realized how much that would be fun to play with in the narrative, again, with things like Ryan having that kind of outline of his past. And there's also fun things you can do, like at some point you can add on a letter to character's name if they're progressing. You can just kind of see that progression throughout the story, or you can hide specific characters kind of by giving them their past name and being able to not tell you who it actually is, but still telling you exactly who it is on the page. So there's a lot of really fun narrative things you can do with it. And yeah, it mainly came from just, I wrote a bunch of short names. I went, I need to make this make sense in the world. I can't just write a bunch of short names. So, yeah.
It's very cool how something like that, almost like where you're writing and it's like, I'm just going to cheat this a little bit, go short, ends up being like such a unique aspect of the book, the series that is. It was very cool. I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah,
Um,
I saw there was a meme for writers, and it was like a pipe with a hole in it, and like this water going everywhere. And it was like, oh, what writers do with world building, and then it swaps to the second panel, and then they made like a fountain around it. So it was like, yes, there might be a mistake, but you can make it work and really look nice. I always think of that when I'm writing, especially with the first draft. If something does come up, it's quite cool to just kind of find a way to make it fit in an interesting way, because it has implications further on. And you can write yourself into corners with that, so it's always something to be careful with, but you can come up with some more unique ideas that might not come up with otherwise.
it's very cool. How that's the creation goes into it, obviously, but it was very unique. I enjoyed it, and keeping with the highlighting aspect, I mentioned I wanted to ask this as well, but there's I'm not even going to read them because I am not an audiobook narrator. My voice just won't do it justice. But throughout the books, you see all of these highlighted quotes, and some of them kind of relate to such a heavy emotional aspect, and it could be any facet of life, I suppose. But I feel like I came across them a lot more in yours, where uh, it was very introspective and very beautifully written, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And as a complete uncreative, like I already mentioned, I fuck up stick figures. The gene is gone. But
I
while
am
you're
no artist either. Can't do it.
can't do it. Even when I played music, I was a rhythm guitarist because it was play a C chord, play an E chord, play a D chord, and then just do that again. And I would be like, okay. So that's where I'm at. But when you're writing and as you're creating something, it doesn't have to be the first draft or second or anything like that. But when you come up with a line, like all of these frequently highlighted ones, do you know right away to yourself, like, crushed it? Like, that is good. That's perfect. Or does it take someone, whether it's a beta reader, an editor, ARC reader, something like that, really pointing it out to you and going, this almost transcends the book and means something to me personally, where it connects with the reader that way? Do you know when you've written something like that, like right off the bat, or does it have to get kind of pointed out to you and you're like, yeah, like I did good?
Hell yeah. Sometimes. I do think sometimes, like when you come to big character moments or something that you just have, you're in their heads and it is very internal and introspective, it is nice to kind of come up with these phrases that just kind of sum it all up into like a grand idea. And sometimes I write those, I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that. I would stick with that. I would highlight that. But I'm always surprised at what people pick up. Like some of those don't get highlighted, some of them do, but then they highlight other sections that I hadn't flagged as something being particularly highlightable, but suddenly it becomes highlightable to someone else, which is something that's really cool, that kind of every reader can kind of pick out different things for them that ties to them. That's a really cool element. So sometimes, but not always.
It's always interesting to hear that, because a lot of the times it's on the spectrum of no, like I had no idea, and
Yeah.
or it's just like, yeah, I like change one word from a line to like really make it hit, or like that type of thing. So I like getting the perspective of each author on how they see that. It's very cool.
Yeah, there are sometimes I come to those moments where I was like, I need something here that's gonna, have that emotional impact. And I write something and go, that's not it. I'm gonna have to come back later and fix this and come up with something better. So I've definitely had that as well, where you need a moment here. You need the kind of like that emotional impact, but you can't always come up with it right on the spot when you're drafting.
It's a very interesting how all of that comes out. So I like asking that. As we are pivoting to book, I guess this is going to be book 2.5, Tomb of Tomes.
Yeah, 1.5 technically. It takes place between 1 and 2, yes. But I'm publishing it after book 2 because I'm an idiot and I didn't plan this.
We're both idiots is what I've learned on this.
Yeah, I didn't have that. I didn't have this novella in my head until I wrote book 2. So narratively, it takes place between 1 and 2. I do remember my friend my friend Michael came up to me and said, "Oh, are you going to write like a novella between each book?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I'm just going to have the prequel novella, then the 3 books." And then I wrote the Black Manta. I went, "Oh, I really want to write a novella."
That was
So
what I was about to ask, because I was
yeah,
like, we have the book, the point 5, which you can get for free on by signing
yes,
up to your newsletter, which is
yeah.
awesome. So I would
Mhm.
definitely recommend doing that. And now this is 1.5.
Yeah.
Which, can you just give a reminder when this is coming out? I left
January
really
30th.
important info. January 30th.
January
Okay.
30th. Very soon. Kind of
Very,
working
yeah,
on that.
we're getting there.
Yeah.
But heading into this, and I know you've already mentioned that you're working on book 3. What else, or is there anything else you have kind of percolating up there that you're going to be working on, or is this series kind of what you're focused on? Which I would not complain if it is.
This is definitely the main focus for 2026. Kind of have the novella coming out January. Book 3 will come out kind of late 2026. I'm not quite sure when, but that'll be like the Shadowbinders trilogy done. There's 5 of them, but it's still a trilogy. It counts, the novellas. So that'll be the trilogy done. And there is going to be a sequel series to that I've already kind of started hinted at in the books, and I've already started outlining several of the books and kind of done a lot of like the behind the scenes planning for them, but I don't think I'll jump into that as soon as I finish book 3. I think I'm going to hop over and try something a little bit different first, and then come back around to writing the sequel series, because I think the sequel series is going to be quite long and quite complicated. So I kind of want a break a little bit to write something shorter, and then before I jump into this, because I think they'll be quite chunky books when I get around to them.
Awesome. That it is very interesting to hear. And I'm not going to be the typical person who's like, can you give us any insight on that project? But I am definitely looking forward to it when details do kind of matriculate out there. Because this was I think this was one of the first arcs that I applied to. Whether it was the right book or wrong, it doesn't matter. We're just not going to talk about that anymore. But I feel like this is one of the more unique series that is kind of floating out around there. So this was really something that I was very much looking forward to doing and talking to you about it, because I enjoyed book 1 and 2 immensely, and I am looking forward to 1.5 and whatever comes next. And where can people keep up with you on the socials? Like I mentioned, I don't think you're going to have a problem attracting more people to it, to the Instagram and everything. But just let people know where they could follow you on there.
Yeah, of course. I think I'm at the_fools_tale on Instagram and YouTube. And those are probably the 2 I'm most active on. I do have Twitter and stuff like that, but I rarely use it. Really, Instagram and YouTube are kind of like the main social media that I use.
So yeah, you guys can go follow him over there. It's kind of weird, Twitter. And by weird, I mean it sucks, especially except for,
around it, but it does, yeah.
Except for like this little community on there. Like I had someone reach out to me today. They followed and commented on our post, and it was like, "Oh, that looks so interesting. Be sure to follow me back. I'm looking forward to hearing what you're writing about." And I was like,
yeah,
like I'm a shitty writer, and it's very bot filled and horrible. I made a Twitter account so I could make fun of the New York Jets years ago, but I'm glad I did, because I found all of you guys. But definitely worth a follow on the Instagram and the YouTube.
It's a shame, because there are so many cool people that mainly just use Twitter, but I just can't face all the bots and everything over there now. It's ridiculous.
It is horrible. Horror. Even like starting off fresh. Like when I made my first one, I think I got like 200 followers, and I was like, wow, like I'm killing it over here. And I looked at like the follower list, and it was just like Candy Jade XOXO, and I was like, shit. Like, damn it. But it's funny how that goes. But it's like I said, your Instagram, very responsive. You put out a lot of really cool content, especially on there, and the YouTube as well. So I would urge everyone to throw you a follow on there. And it's very cool to hear the background you have with the digital aspect of things, because it kind of goes into why you do such a good job over there. Like every time I see you pop up, it's actually a watch, not a scroll. Like, okay, I try not to doom scroll, but you do very good work. So kudos to there. It's always nice when someone that you read, whose books you read and social media you follow turns out to be a very cool person as well. So I just want to thank you for joining me today and putting out great stuff, whether it's online, whether it's books. And, you know, I'm very much looking forward to what comes next. And consider this an open invite, permanent spot whenever you feel like coming back.
Definitely, yeah. This was a ton of fun. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always fun to chat about the books, especially when you've read them and enjoyed them. It's always fun to kind of delve into some of the elements to it. So yeah, this was a blast. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And it works out even better for me because I get to go back to work now, but this was way better than any lunch break that I could have had. So I definitely appreciate it. Thank you for everyone in the chat that was popping off there. And I hope you and yours have a great holiday season.
Thanks, you too. That was awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good rest of your day, sir.